All right, I'm back for the second part. It's going to be a second. I know I have a page of note, but I actually went through half of it in the first episode because I wanted a lot of details and a lot of explanation to make it clear. So it's going to be a two-parter, and I think it's important, like, to go into detail about control because it's such a recurring theme, and it helps you better understand people, better not just pedophiles and creeps, but people in general. Like pretty much every woman I know has been in some kind of abusive relationship with a man that was controlling. And when you study Lorne, it also helps you study your own life, and it makes you realize that your boyfriend or girlfriend was not in love with you. She was just a control freak and a tyrant, and a potentate. That's another point I want to go on later, that Lorne can do no wrong. Lorne has done nothing wrong. He's never made a single mistake in his entire life. Lorne is perfect, but that's a topic for another day. One last thing before we continue, there might be a part 3 about control because it's a vast subject. And but that's going to be in a while because I have other subjects to discuss in the dark side of Lorne. Okay, about control. Where does it stems from? There's a few theory on where power trips come from, but usually the most generally accepted theory is that the child is either a psychopath, like somebody who, the definition of a psychopath is somebody who doesn't feel empathy for others. It's not the official definition, there's a psychological definition, but basically, if I want to sum it up, a psychopath as it's not that they don't have any emotion, that's a common misconception, but they have absolutely no capacity or capability to put themselves in another person's shoes. Like, in other words, they don't care about hurting someone because they cannot imagine the pain that they're doing. Lorne is not a psychopath. Psychopath as a well, I'm not a psychologist and I didn't evaluate him anyway, so I cannot say for sure. And Lorne does show some symptoms of being a psychopath. But there's a big factor that, in my opinion, goes against that theory that he's really a psychopath. And when you think about psychopaths, you think about killers in movie, but that's not what it is. A true psychopath is not like a super killer, elite killer. If you want the best definition of psychopath, watch Wall Street, the first movie, and the main character Gecko, that's a psychopath. But not even like totally. Like if you watch Wall Street 2, well, I won't spoil it, but and there's a study that psychopaths are attracted to financial jobs. I'm not saying everyone in finance is a psychopath, but there's a higher concentration of psychopaths in finance and in the police force. There is some evidence that psychopathy is genetic too. So if you have genes, genetics, you have a higher chances of being one. And there's a good evidence that depends on genetics more than environment. So it's a condition that you're born with. It can be exacerbated by some factors, but generally, think about that movie where the mother has her own child and the child is like a psychopath, and there's the other child. I don't know the name, but she's holding both children over a cliff, and she chooses to let her son fall. She can only pull one up, and she lets her son fall and die, and she saves the other child. If somebody could tell me what movie that is, I really don't remember. Or if you're listening to Game of Thrones, I guess Jeffrey could be a psychopath, but it's hard to say because people like to throw diagnosis like quickly, like, oh, that guy's a narcissist, that guy is a psychopath, that guy is that and this. When it comes to using adjectives like, someone is selfish, that's okay. But when it comes to diagnosis, that takes time. You cannot read one chat log and say, oh, Lorne is a narcissist. Maybe he is. Maybe we can throw a theory and maybe we can be 50% certain that he was a narcissist. I don't think he was personally, but 50% or maybe 60% is the highest we'll go. Diagnosing personality disorders is very long, and even professionals tend to skip corners and they tend to give a quick diagnosis with a few sessions. But in order to be diagnosed, first, not all psychiatrists and psychologists are equal, and most don't care. Like, most are like, if they're not doing private clinic at $200 an hour, they don't really care, to be honest. They want to get get away with it. Like they want to end it and just get a diagnosis quickly. And usually most diagnoses in psychology are botched. They just want to get rid of you, especially for, if it's paid by, let's say it's paid, for example, by the prison. Lorne was diagnosed with emotional distress disorder, which is a bullshit diagnosis. More on that later. But he was diagnosed with that. I'm pretty sure that he was seen maybe 3 times by a psychologist, if that. In order to diagnose a personality disorder, it takes 6 months of weekly evaluation of at least an hour. That's a long time, and I know very few psychologists and psychiatrists, just from the statistic, that do that. Usually, they get their ideas like pretty quickly, and they stick with it with their own bias. And there was a study where they put one guy that was normal, and they had him evaluated by 12 psychiatrists, and every single psychiatrist ended up with a different diagnosis. That gives you an idea of how unreliable and how rushed diagnoses are. But there are some good psychologists, so I won't say that they're all bad. Some of them really care and really want to get the good, because if you don't have the good diagnosis, well, first there's the medication, you might get the bad medication, but there's also the fact that the therapy is going to be oriented around the wrong element. For instance, for Lorne, let's say he was a psychopath. Well, tough luck, there is no therapy for psychopathy. You're born like that, you're going to die like that. It's like pedophilia. There is no real therapy for it. There's a treatment, they make I'm getting long, but I want to talk about that. For pedophiles like Lorne, what they do is that they lock him in a room and they show him pictures of children. And whenever the pedophile feels some sexual excited, he's sexually excited by the little children. And typically they show like a video of children playing in a park. It's fucking gross. So what they do is that each time the pedophile feels like sexually excited by seeing kids play in a park, he sniffs some ammonia, some disgusting chemical. And the idea, it's based on a conditioning and behavioral approach. The idea is that the next time he will see some small children, he will associate his sexual excitation towards children to the bad smell, the foul smell, and he will lose his sexual excitation. Does that work? I don't really know. I believe it does work a little. I don't know if it will work forever. Like maybe eventually they overcome that hurdle, or rather that treatment. But that's the kind of treatment you have for pedophilia, and that's the kind of treatment you could have for psychopaths. But they actually tried a lot of treatments, of other treatment with pedophiles, such as talk therapy, and it's a complete waste of time. So if Lorne gets diagnosed as a psychopath, the therapy, he's probably not going to get the right therapy. I believe that Lorne's biggest problem, like psychologically, and I'm going to finish my section on that, but his psychological problems are so grave, like so deep and so pronounced. Lorne is such a psychological mess that I don't believe he could be helped at all. Even if you took the best psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists in the world, Lorne is too far gone. I believe that. Lorne should have received help when he was like 20 or something, but at 36, his problem have degenerated way, way too far. I would say that for Lorne, it would take 15 years of therapy, and there's no guarantee it would grant any effect. Lorne is a seriously troubled person. He has some deep, deep psychological problems. We'll talk about that in another episode, but now I want to continue about control. Okay, so Lorne, I believe one of the reasons Lorne thrives and wants and actually seeks control is because he never got it, and he never gets it in his life. If you look at his life, he was the youngest of the family, and it's already a family that was too big. Let's face it, his mother was pretty poor. They lived in a pretty derelict house, and she had 6 children. The father ran away and never paid a cent of child support. And back in the days, it wasn't like today. Like, you had very little recourse as a woman if your husband didn't want to pay child support. So Lorne grew up in poverty, or maybe not extreme poverty. He always ate, and he always had a roof over his head and clothes. But 6 children, he probably wore the clothes that his older siblings wore, and he probably had the things, the books and pencil that his older sibling had. And there's also the fact that Lorne, all his entire life, was the smallest one in the family, the youngest one. So what kind of control did he have? None. You know, his five siblings, and he even says it. He says his siblings are dumbass. That's the term he used. And you know why it is with older siblings. If you don't have very strong parents that are very like protective and fair and equal, and you know, with six children, Gwendolyn had to work. Lorne's mother had to work, and she probably worked two shifts to be able to pay the house, the food, the clothes, and everything. So I guess she didn't have too much time to parent her children and parent Lorne. And it probably fell upon the older sibling to do the parenting, and that's not really a good idea because when you're 14 or 15, you're not going to be such a great parent. You could be an excellent brother or sister, but to give orders, let's be honest. If you're 15 and your parents let you do what you want, like if you know your mom is always working, your dad is gone, you're pretty going to be like a little bit power tripping about your brother. You're going to be a bit authoritative, you know. I believe a brother should like be supporting and nice, and you know, he should be a support. Definitely not a leader, like someone who gets to choose everything. And you know, Lorne is the smallest, so imagine that you're Lorne and you're 8, and you have a brother who is 15 or 16, and he says, "I'm taking your toy, Lorne." And you know, that's it. The 16-year-old takes it. Again, if there's a good parent, if there's a good mother, if I was, you know, if I had a child and I learned that my oldest child did it, I would be furious. I say, you don't do that. You don't steal your brother's toy. And normally there's a reason he did that, but you know, your child's not going to steal at random if you're a good parent. But if he did that, it would be a serious test, and I would reevaluate my parenting. But I would react. I wouldn't let him get away with it. But Lorne, with Gwendolyn absent, and the stepfather, you know, she said my mother found a stepfather and she was with him until I was 30, but it's not the same thing, you know. The stepfather comes into the picture, but there's six children. And what happens typically with stepfathers is that they don't like all children equally. Fathers do. Like if I had six children, even if my personality didn't fit with, let's say I had a children who had a completely different personality. Like he was very, I don't know, but very adventurous and very outsidey and all. If I had a son like that or a daughter like that, I would still love that child to death, and I would definitely be as good with that child as the other. I wouldn't favorize a child. I wouldn't go and have my favorites, you know. And you know what I'm talking about, you know. There are some family where for Christmas a child is going to get like a PS4, and the other child is going to get a Christmas card. You know what I mean? Like favorites. For a father, there are some fathers that do that. I'm not saying that every father is perfect, far from it. But father, you know, it's still your children. It's still, how can I say that? But you still witnessed their birth. You still saw them as babies. So you had more. Not only that, I don't want to generalize. There are some fantastic stepfathers and there are some absolutely horrendous fathers. But as a stepfather, you step into the pictures and there are six children in front of you. There are a few that you're gonna like more, and a few that you're gonna like less. Unless you're a genuinely like fantastic human being, and you just force yourself to be like equal, which is a tiny minority of people. But generally speaking, the stepfather is gonna like some child more than the other, and I'm fairly sure that the stepfather is gonna like the older children. The youngest one, Lorne, I think the stepfather was not that nice with him. That's a guess. But I'm betting that you know what it is, the favoritism. Though. So if Lorne goes to his stepfather and says, my older brother stole from me, the stepfather says, he's going to say something like, nah, he just borrowed it from you. Nah, it's no big deal. You have to learn to share, you know. Stepfather is not going to care, first of all, and he's going to show his true colors. Like, no, he couldn't do that. And there's actually something that a friend lives. So the older sibling would beat, one of my friends, his older brother would beat him and abuse him and steal from him and break his toys. And he went to see his stepfather and he says, he did that. And the stepfather said, nah, you're lying. Your older brother would not do that. He's a perfect human being. You're lying. You probably broke the toys yourself to frame him. And favoritism is a big, big issue. And when it's stepfather, it's a problem that's exacerbated. So in general, Lorne had no control growing up over Not much. Even his grades were bad. So even in school, the teacher were probably yelling at him and giving him suspension and detention because he had D's on everything. And then he was a teenager and he doesn't seem like, a sexual prodigy. So I guess it didn't work with girls too much. He's so uninformed. Like at one point, he tries to explain what her vagina is, and he actually points to the clitoris, or the opposite, something like that. No, I remember he said, okay, he explained to Kayla how to find her clitoris, but the element that he described is the big lips in the vagina. So he's not that strong with women. All this to say that I believe that in the 36 years that Lorne grew up, he never got any meaningful form of control. He was always the one being told what to do and when to do it and the way to do it. The only moment Lorne really got some control is with Durango Mango when he stole from them. I bet Lorne felt in control, but then again, not that much because he stole their money and he ran away, but it's not really control. It's more like it's pulling a con, of course, he's stealing, but it's not like having someone do what you want them to do. It's just stealing from them. So it's not the same kind of control. It's more like an abuse. So he was abusing some strangers or, well, some people, strangers for him. So he abused them and he probably felt a little bit of control, but not much. But to be the one giving orders, well, there's actually another point where he felt in control, and that's what with his nieces. And you can see that he really liked it. Like he talks of his nieces in a very high manner, and he really does miss them. And when he talks about his nieces, he looks and he feels like really happy and really like he loves. He says, although they were 13 when I live in Washington, which is not the next door, it still feels to me that they are 13. And you can feel that Lorne just loves being the one in control. And when they ask his permission to buy a tight pair of shorts, that's perhaps one of the rare moments when Lorne was in control. And I can tell, and you can tell that Lorne loved it. He says it made me feel really proud and close to them. But aside from that, if you look at the type of situation where you're in control, for example, if you have a job and you have employees, if you go out with friends and you kind of tell them what to do, like let's go there, let's do that. I mean, we all have a friend that he never gives any idea, and we have to decide everything. That's a kind of control with children, obviously, but also sometime with a significant other. You can be in control sometime, and your significant other will be in control some other times. That's the kind of position that Lorne never really experienced. Like his job were pretty much shit jobs, so he was always the one taking orders. He never was the one taking decisions. So that's why I believe talking about the control aspect is so important. And I'm going over time right now, and this is taking so much longer than I thought. So I'm gonna do a part 3 actually. That's pretty crazy. So I'm gonna end part 2 here, and next part we're gonna talk about Derek, and we're gonna talk about how control excites Lorne. He's sexually excited by control, and we'll explain why, and how he asserts that control over Kayla. So see you in episode 3.